So, best fighting game of 2024. Honestly, this year hasn't necessarily been a high profile year for fighting video games because the only two games that really come to mind in terms of best fighting game of 2024 is Tekken 8 and Dragon Ball Sparking Zero because just about every other fighting game that came out this year is something that people either don't know about or don't give a damn about. But the only thing that I can think about that remotely comes close to those two games in terms of, I guess, quality and I guess a visual appeal is Under Night in Birth 2. And I feel like that's a game that it's not necessarily known to like casual gamers in America, but I think it got like a really it got a really decent meta score. I think it got a meta score of 80. And you compare that to Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, which came out back in October. That got a meta score of 81, but it got a user score of 85. So a lot of people actually like Dragon Ball Sparking Zero. And just about everything about that game was fun, including the animations, the gameplay, the voiceover acting, the what ifs, storylines and all that stuff. But the biggest thing about Sparking Zero that people didn't like was the difficulty level, which is something that I guess it's going to take time to get used to and adjust to and all that other stuff, but it is what it is. Tekken 8, that's a game that came out at the beginning of the year. I believe it came out on January 26th, and that got a meta score of 90 and a user score of 7.6. And honestly, like that game was probably one of the best Tekken games that we've gotten within the past 30 years. And it's crazy that Tekken 8 literally came out 30 years after the original Tekken game came out back in 1994. And the thing is, a lot of people remember Tekken's 2 and 3 more so than they do the original Tekken game from 1994, mainly because it was so basic. Um, Tekken 8, though, had just about everything you can ask for, like a star-studded roster, great graphics, awesome, fighting mechanics and gameplay. Um, Also, you had like a variety of different game modes that added to its replay value, and I'm talking about modes like story mode, arcade quest, ghost battle. You also had online modes such as Versus Battle and Tekken Ball. Both can also be played offline as well. You got a practice mode offline, and I believe there's a practice mode online too, if I'm not mistaken either. But but yeah, like Tekken 8 for the most part was a game that had been hyped like for many, many years before it was released because Tekken 7 came out back in 2015 and Tekken 7 ended up being the best selling Tekken game of all time after its release. But it took a couple of years for it to reach 10 million copies in terms of sales. But the fact that Tekken 7 surpassed Tekken 3 in terms of sales is astonishing. But at the same time, a lot of people would probably say that Tekken 3 is more iconic than Tekken 7, myself included. Tekken 8, for the most part, I feel like the story was very intriguing with the Mishima storyline continuing and the thing with the Kazuyas and Jun and Jin trying to, I guess, rid the world of Kazuya, and then finding out that Hihachi Mishima really didn't die, and that's something that a lot of people didn't expect, but some people thought, it's something that makes sense because Hihachi Mishima has been a key part of the main storyline for the Tekken series for like the past 30 years. So killing him off, would practically, end the series or would end the best storyline that you have with Tekken. And, if you kill off Hihachi, where do you go from there for the most part? But, but yeah, I mean, there was like a lot of familiar faces that returned to Tekken 8, such as Jin Kazama. Jun Kazama made her return. I feel like that's something that it drew the intrigue of a lot of people because Jun Kazama hasn't been playable in a canon Tekken game since Tekken 2 from 1995. You also saw the return of characters like Nina, like Eddie Gordo, who I believe is DLC. You had King, you had Lily, you had Asuka. Um, you had all those characters return in addition to like new characters such as Lydia and Reina. And I believe Hihachi ended up being a DLC character as well. But yeah, but I think Tekken 8 had at least like 35 playable characters, for the most part. And I'm not I'm not surprised if we're gonna get more like DLC characters a little bit later down the line. But as it currently stands, like the last time I checked, Tekken 8 did at least 2 million in terms of sales, which actually isn't bad, but at the same time, Tekken 8 is not selling as much as it should. But if you look at like, the landscape of gaming and you're looking at like sales and all that stuff, it seems like for the most part, there isn't too many games that's doing too well in terms of sales. And it seems like they can barely get over 3 mil or 4 mil. And I'll go on record and say that Tekken 8 is definitely a better game than Mortal Kombat 1. Um, Tekken 8, I feel like, is even a better game than Street Fighter 6 to some extent. Street Fighter 6, don't get me wrong, is a good game too, but it seems like the Street Fighter series is not quite as relevant as it was. Um, like 8 years ago when Street Fighter Five came out back in 2016 because I believe Street Fighter Five ended up becoming the best selling Street Fighter game in the entire franchise, and that means it surpassed like the two series from the 90s as well. But yeah, Tekken 8 for the most part, I feel like is like definitely like one of the best fighting games of this year. Some people might say they enjoy Sparking Zero more, but it really depends on what you're a fan of. If you're a fan of just like arcade, styled like fighting games, you'll probably be more into Tekken 8. If you're more into like, fast paced, like, fighting games with like cartoonish animation, all that stuff. Sparking Zero might be more for you. I feel like Tekken 8 appeals more to adults, while Sparking Zero appeals more to like the general audience for the most part. And I feel like Tekken 8 has the potential to either equal or surpass Tekken 7 in relation to sales, but it's going to take probably several years for that to happen because Tekken 7 didn't reach 10 mil overnight. It took time. And, I feel that, Tekken 8 is definitely going to be one of those games that Bandai Namco is going to have a hard time trying to top if they do make a Tekken 9 in the future because, Tekken 8 for the most part, it just it has a level of storytelling that, we haven't really seen in previous Tekken games with probably with the exception of like Tekken 7. And and I do feel that, Tekken 8 for the most part, it's eventually going to get like, more DLC a little bit later down the line because I feel like there's a lot they can do with that. They can even add additional game modes as well if they choose to do so. But they got to do something to try and like appeal more to casuals because it's not selling like it should. And honestly, like I wouldn't be surprised, like for the most part, if this game ended up being on a lot of people's list for the best fighting game of 2024 because I'm looking at like certain ceremonies like golden joysticks, and pretty much it's been nominated for like ultimate game of the year, best multiplayer game, and then you look at the game awards, it's being nominated for the best fighting game, the best multiplayer game. So yeah, Tekken 8 is probably like the fighting game of 2024. And even though it's a good game, it didn't really have a lot of competition in relation to the fighting genre. And I feel like if it was released back in 2023, it definitely would have given Street Fighter 6 a run for its money, or it probably would have ended up being, the best fighting game of 2023, but, that's not necessarily the case, and, and honestly, as cool as Tekken 8 was, I'm still waiting for, like, a Tekken Tag Tournament 3, which is something I've been waiting for years now, but at this point, I don't think it's going to happen, or Bandai Namco has no intention on making it a thing, but, either way, Tekken 8 is actually a pretty dope game, and I'm pretty sure it's gonna remain popular throughout the majority of 2025 as well.